Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really zeroing in on something specific.
Yeah. What do we got?
It's how Fox News has been, presenting things, specifically the economy and foreign policy under Trump and then under Biden.
Oh, okay. Comparing the coverage. That sounds interesting.
Exactly. We've got this Midas YouTube transcript, and it captures a bunch of on-air statements. So our goal is really just to unpack those claims.
See what's being said and maybe what's not being said.
Precisely. We're talking gas prices, GDP, Greenland, China, Ukraine, kind of all over the map.
So a real mix of domestic and international stuff.
Yeah, and we just want to understand the narratives,
Yeah.
right? The context. So let's just jump in.
That's good.
Yeah.
You know, what strikes me immediately just thinking about it is how different the interpretation of like the same event or data point can be.
Depending on who's in the White House at the time?
Exactly. You see this tendency maybe to play up the good stuff for one side and the bad for the other. So looking at specific claims should be, well, revealing.
Okay, let's start with one that, well, it definitely seemed designed to get attention. Jesse Waters.
Oh, yeah. What did he say?
Apparently, the quote was something like, "The best news that we have is that the Vice President J.D. Vance is focused on stealing Greenland."
Stealing Greenland. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and the YouTube video we're using, it definitely picked up on that with, like, a lot of sarcasm.
I can imagine. I mean, what are the implications there, talking about a NATO ally like that?
Well, that's the question, right? It sets a certain tone for talking about diplomacy, doesn't it?
It really does. Even if it's meant as, I don't know, a joke, it still risks sounding aggressive or dismissive towards, a partner.
Undermining trust, maybe?
Could be. The reaction in the video probably reflects that concern, that it sort of trivializes pretty serious geopolitical stuff.
Okay, so shifting gears a bit. The economy. Treasury Secretary Scott.
Ah, Basant. Right.
He apparently claimed some great news. He said gas prices, get this, as low as $1.93 in parts of Florida.
Oh, $1.93.
Hmm.
That sounds low.
Yeah.
Very low.
And also an 87% drop in egg prices.
87% on eggs.
Yeah. The YouTube commentary, not surprisingly, questioned those numbers pretty hard, like called them absurd, potentially inaccurate.
Well, yeah. When you hear figures that specific and that dramatic,
You got to ask questions, right? Like, are these isolated examples? Or do they reflect what's happening broadly?
exactly. The skepticism you mentioned, it points to needing context. Compared to wider data, does it really paint the whole picture for, the average person?
And he framed the gas price drop as an automatic tax cut.
That's a common way to put it.
Mm-hmm.
But the real impact,
Mm-hmm.
it depends if those prices are actually widespread and if they, stick around.
Right. Okay, next up, Kevin Hassank on GDP.
Okay, Hassan, former economic advisor.
Yeah. He was arguing that the negative GDP near the end of Biden's term was because of, well, Biden's policies, but also bad weather and wildfires.
Okay, so blaming external factors too.
Right. But then he pivoted, saying there was positive momentum starting in February.
Ah, the turnaround narrative.
But the YouTube video points out something interesting. Hassan had apparently guaranteed like 2 to 2.5% GDP growth for that first quarter.
Oh, really? A guarantee. That's bold.
Yeah, and the video also mentions his track record wasn't always spot on with predictions.
It's tricky trying to pin GDP on just one or two things, isn't it? Policies matter, sure. Weather events can have an impact, but GDP is complex.
So many factors involved.
Exactly. Domestic, international. So attributing it so directly, especially after a prediction didn't quite pan out, it raises questions about how selective the analysis might be.
Makes sense. Okay, then J.D. Vance weighed in.
The vice president.
Yeah. He basically said the current economic challenges, quote, Joe Biden's economy. He highlighted inheriting debt, like $2 trillion and a trade deficit.
Focusing on the starting point then. What was inherited?
Right. But the counter in the YouTube video was pretty strong. They brought up a Wall Street Journal piece calling the economy the envy of the world under Biden.
Okay, so a very different take.
Yeah, mentioning job growth, low unemployment, infrastructure stuff. And they also noted that the national debt also went up during Trump's first term.
So it really shows how you can frame the same economy completely differently, doesn't it?
Totally depends on the metrics you pick and your starting point.
Vance focuses on inherited issues. The counter focuses on recent indicators. To get the full picture, you really need to look at the whole timeline and a whole range of indicators. Yeah.
Like a trade deficit isn't always bad.
Right. It can mean strong consumer demand, people buying imports, and national debt. Well, that's a whole other can of worms with short and long-term implications. It's complex.
Speaking of debt, Kayleigh McEnany apparently claimed Trump didn't significantly increase it in his first term.
Okay. How did the source material handle that?
It mentioned an AP fact check, which said, yeah, debt went up significantly under Trump, but the raw dollar amount added was actually bigger under Obama, though over a longer period.
Ah, so the nuance is key. It went up under both.
Exactly. McEnany's claim seems maybe focused on just Trump's first term versus Obama's whole tenure, perhaps. The comparison matters.
Right. And you have to consider the context, too. The economy at the time, legislation passed, any major events like wars or recessions, it all feeds into the debt.
Okay, switching topics again. Sean Duffy on air traffic controllers.
Transportation issues. What was the claim?
He blamed problems on controllers retiring under Biden and said the transportation secretary, Buttigieg, was, quote, literally getting rid of everybody.
Literally getting rid of everybody. That sounds extreme.
Yeah. The counterpoint in the video brought up the mandatory retirement age, which is 56.
Which has been around for a while, right? Not a new policy.
Exactly. And the average retirement age is apparently 53. They also mentioned proposed bonuses to keep experienced controllers working longer.
So it sounds like it's probably more complicated than just one person getting rid of people. Retirements are ongoing because of the age rule.
Yeah.
Staffing levels are always a challenge.
Yeah, blaming it solely on the current admin seems like an oversimplification.
Very likely it's a workforce management issue, logistics. Lots going on there.
Okay, Scott Bessant again, this time on China and tariffs.
Back to Bessant. What about China?
He said China needs to de-escalate tariffs. He talked about a potentially devastating impact on China's economy from reduced orders. Like, the U.S. was sending a message to China to chill.
Taking a hard line, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Emphasizing U.S. leverage.
Yeah. But the commentary in the YouTube video suggested this approach might actually make China look like the more rational, normal actor on the world stage.
Interesting counter perspective. That the tough talk could backfire diplomatically.
And Bessant also apparently said a deal with China could be just weeks or months away.
Predicting a quick resolution.
Yeah.
That's optimistic, often, with complex trade deals.
Especially with China, right?
Yeah.
So different ways to frame that whole relationship. Bessant's hardline versus the idea it might not look good internationally.
And we should remember what tariffs are. Fundamentally, they're taxes on imports. They affect businesses and consumers in both countries.
Good point. Then there was this kind of side note. A message from Donald Trump.
To who?
To Steve Doocy at Fox News, congratulating him on a new and probably enhanced role, praising him in the show's ratings.
Okay. Why include that in this analysis, do you think?
Well, the implication in the source, I think, was to highlight the, perceived closeness between Trump and the network.
Reinforcing the idea that it's maybe a favorable platform for him.
That seems to be the angle, yeah.
Got it. Okay. What else?
Last big one was Marco Rubio on Ukraine and China.
Okay. Foreign policy again?
Rubio said Ukraine and Russia are still far apart in negotiations, needs a breakthrough. He also mentioned some minerals deal being good for the U.S. and Ukraine.
Standard assessment of the war, sounds like. Difficult paths to peace.
Yeah, but then the YouTube commentary accused Rubio and Trump of possible market manipulation.
Market manipulation.
It was Hiles by suggesting potential deals with China, the idea being it could influence markets. And it also brought up Trump's earlier claim about getting peace in Ukraine in 24 hours.
Ah, the 24-hour claim.
Yeah.
Which he later walked back.
Right, call it a joke.
Yeah.
The video is pretty critical of that, given how serious the situation is.
Understandable. So several layers there. The difficulty of the actual negotiations, the questions about political statements maybe affecting markets, and then the contrast between bold claims and, well, reality.
Yeah, it really highlights that disconnect sometimes between the rhetoric and the complex, serious nature of these global conflicts.
Absolutely.
So, wrapping this up, as we went through all these different points, it feels like there's a clear pattern, doesn't it? Claims from Fox News figures on the economy, on foreign policy.
Definitely. And the Midas transcript consistently offers that critical perspective, right?
Yeah.
Pointing out alternative views, inconsistencies.
Exactly. It really just underlines how important it is for all of us, for you listening, to be active consumers of information.
Discernment is key. Because different sources, they're going to frame things through their own lens. It's just how it often works.
You really have to compare, look for context, try to see the bigger picture.
It takes effort, but it's essential if you want to form your own, well-grounded opinions.
So maybe here's something for you to think about as you go about your day.
Yeah.
When you hear these different stories, these different narratives about big, complex issues like the economy or foreign relations, what questions do you ask?
Good point. Like, how do you personally try to get past the surface claims?
Yeah. How do you decide what information feels trustworthy and what maybe needs a bit more skepticism?
It's an ongoing process for everyone, I think.
Definitely. So we hope this dive encourages you to keep digging, keep thinking critically about the information you encounter. Thanks for joining us.